Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Control Committee Thursday the 15th of February 2024. Just gone 6 p.m. Welcome to our viewers on YouTube. Any apologies, please? I've got Councillor Hassel.
John Evans.
John Evans. Just Councillor Morgan McGee, who hasn't turned up, so yeah. Any late items? Do you want to do that one, Paul? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've become aware that some, if not all, members have received an email inviting you to a site visit, not from us, but from an applicant. And what I would do is encourage members, one, perhaps not to attend a site visit, particularly on your own, because and if a site visit is needed, we know the protocol. Site visit, we will go as a committee with officers, and it will have strict rules, strict guidelines, where it is this format, led by officer and chair, and there's no opportunity then for you to be, I guess, to be seen to be making other judgments. Because I would want you all to come into this chamber with an open and clear mind to be able to make a clear decision. Now, obviously some sites, we're going to look at site visits later on in the agenda, some sites you can see from the public domain. So on the back of that email, you could go and visit the public area, walk along the street, but I would encourage you not to go on site with the applicant. I kind of read it as a form of lobbying, which again I don't really like, but so my message to members would be to be seen to be open and transparent. Don't do a site visit with an applicant. If there is one needed, we'll go as a committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Item 3, declarations of interest. That's none. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 14th of December 2023. Someone like to... Thank you. I was looking at you, Councillor Bolton, because you normally do it, so that's it, Councillor Bolton. Any seconders for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Noah, thank you. Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee held on 30th of November 2023. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Item 6, appeal decisions. That's you again, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I believe I've got 5 appeals for you. The first one on Abbey Street. This was allowed. Its planning permission was granted for the change of use of office buildings to form 2 flats in multiple occupation. Flat 1 had a maximum of 7 occupants, and Flat 2 a maximum of 8 occupants. The main issue in this appeal was noise nuisance, or the effect of the development on the living conditions of the residents, given the proximity of his existing commercial property. It's an interesting appeal, which I'd encourage you to read. Air quality, noise and noise surveys were done, and the consultees, our consultees generally accepted the findings subject to imposition of conditions, and the inspector felt, well, there's residents close by on Abbey Street. It can be considered that on the very edge of an employment area, this isn't a bad residential location, and accordingly granted planning permission. So there's a building in multiple occupation there. So you've got 7 occupants in one flat and 8 in the other, and a series of conditions. The second appeal is on Marylebone Crescent, and the proposal was to erect a 2-storey dwelling. Can we go back to the previous slide? The inspector had several issues that he looked through. The principal one being the relationship of the proposal, the building in the Red Edge, with the properties at the back. 39A and 39B are bungalows with rooms in the roof space, and the inspector felt that the differing heights of the properties and the separation distance between the proposed dwelling and those at the rear was inadequate to allow an acceptable degree of privacy from the first floor rear windows of the proposed dwelling. So there was an overlooking loss of privacy aspect. And he concluded that the proposed development would not provide adequate living conditions for the occupiers of those properties regarding privacy and outlook. He accepted living conditions of the future occupiers of the house was acceptable in terms of the driveway at the side, and he felt that the character and appearance of the street scene was not unduly affected. However, he did dismiss the appeal because of the impact on the neighbours at the rear, quite rightly so. This proposal at Field Rise, Littleover, is also for a new dwelling. It's in the rear garden of 56, and the inspector concluded that the location of that dwelling would have impact on the occupiers of 56 with regard to their outlook, with regard to their privacy, and the occupiers of 58 with regard to their privacy and outlook. It just looks like a too tight site. And the inspector said it would appear cramped within the plot, would not relate to the well to the scale and character of the surrounding properties, and accordingly dismissed the appeal. The next one on Merchant Avenue, you can show the elevations, James. That's what you've got existing, and that was what they proposed. As Mr. Dean would say, nothing further to add. It's awful. And the inspector said, yeah, it's awful. He was concerned about the character and appearance of the area. This was a double-storey rear extension. It looks like a new house. And the inspector dismissed the appeal. And finally, Great Northern Court. This is a change of use from a commercial property to 6 dwelling houses. Now, those 6 dwelling houses are permitted development, subject to prior approval, where we consider, amongst other things, noise. And we felt the noise impacts from the neighbouring uses was unacceptable. The inspector noted the appellant's noise assessment and said, which concluded that they could condition improvements to the occupants in terms of the noise assessment on the building envelope, and the inspector concluded that the impacts from noise from commercial properties on the intended occupiers of the development could be made acceptable subject to suitable mitigation measures being incorporated in the fabric of the building, and granted it with conditions. I've dwelt on 2 appeals, both on noise. You might conclude that, and I have, that it appears that our tolerance to noise and noise impacts are more stringent than the 2 inspectors' decisions. So inspectors are viewing these decisions and giving them a benefit of the doubt in terms of noise impact. Other than that, Chair, I'd encourage reviewing, if you haven't already done so, the reading those appeal statements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Item 7, development control performance. Is that you were? Oh, sorry, Lucy. I do apologise. Got my head down and was.
So, no problem. I was just wondering whether you felt that those 2 applications which were allowed, which are both the bulk of the housing applications, do you think that our tilted balance situation played an effect in that, or do you think it would have been that decision regardless?
It's a good question. I think in both cases the inspector addressed the tilted balance, and whilst not overtly saying it had an impact, I think it weighed heavily in their mind when making the decision, but they focused on these are the concerns, and it is noise nuisance that I'm focusing on. So they recognised and reported on the tilted balance, but it wasn't a decisive factor.
I'm going to move on quickly. Thanks, Lucy. You were pondering them, you were pondering. I got in there quick. Item 7, development control performance. Paul, is that you again?
It is, thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
All I'll say is the DC performance quarter 3, there's stats from October to December last year. I would commend the report to you. We try to run a tight ship, focusing on delivery and negotiating improvements to the mundane, which is where a lot of the time delay takes place. Applications will be in for quite a while we try to improve them through negotiation. Conversely, if an application is so poor, we would refuse it, because you don't want to try and tinker and improve something which is really, really bad. Come back to us with something that's much better, with the expectation of using our pre-application advice. We're here, we'll help you through the process. But there's an awful lot of work, as you can see from the supporting information, which doesn't go into the stats, as well as pre-app, as well as negotiating improvements to schemes. And as you've seen from the appeals, some are just downright awful. But we get them all. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. You can't really get much better than 100%, can you? So, Lucy.
Yeah, sorry, another question on this one as well. I've had a couple of bits of casework recently where both objectors and applicants have talked to me about the time it's taken for an application to be decided. Now, the overall stats here are excellent, and that just shows the amount of work that's going through. But because the government has set a target of this percentage by this time, it's a bit like the NHS, that they've got to deal with this. But the NHS, you know, if you've got cancer, you've got to be seen in this time, which is a bit like this one. The NHS also has the target that says you shouldn't be having to wait for more than a certain period of time. And we're not seeing a target like that. And sometimes, you know, as Paul's explained, there is a reason for the delay, and there is negotiations going on, and we end up with something that is worthwhile. But I had somebody recently who had 5 or was it 6 extensions of time, and they didn't know why. So I'm just wondering whether that might be a statistic that, if you're not keeping an eye on it, we should be keeping an eye on. Because there may be very good reasons, but it might be something that we need to be thinking about in a different way. And whether that is something that might be included in this report, at least on one occasion.
Thank you, Chair. The government, whilst they set the performance stats, allow us to agree on a bespoke timescale, which is the extension of time you're talking about. What I would say is, when I dealt with planning applications way back when, we had, and the government suggested, our caseload at any one time should be about 40 applications each. You could manage 40, you know, you're juggling with 40 applications. What I would say is the team now are turning out the performance that you've got in the report and handling around 70 applications each, which is why it takes so much longer. So if you're negotiating with somebody, the application is still on your books, you're still one of that 70 going on, and I currently have 2 members of staff out of the team of 8, 9 off sick. So it just adds to the... We are lean in terms of resources. And what people do complain to me, like they'll complain to councillors, I do try and say to them, look, bear with us. If it's urgent, if you've got builders lined up, we'll work with you to get a timescale that we can work with. But by doing that, takes the pressure off somebody else's application of those 70 that we're dealing with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. You may.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, and I completely agree with you. And if we were to be more proactive about some of the ones that are trailing, and it might be a matter of chasing the applicant or the applicant's agent because they're not responding to us, all that takes time, and it would mean that the statistics that the excellent statistics you just presented to us will dip a little bit, but it might reduce the number of people getting in touch and emailing yourselves at another level saying, why isn't this happening? So it might improve that quality. But At the moment, we don't see those stats. So if we've got those stats available, I just think it'd be nice to see them.
Thanks, Lucy. We shall move on. Item 8, applications to be considered. Item 8.1, Workshop 2 North Street, Derby. Sarah John. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the demolition of an existing workshop building and its replacement with a 2-storey house in multiple occupation with provision for 4 bedrooms and 4 occupiers. The building is proposed to have a pitched roof and architectural features designed to reflect the traditional Victorian character and appearance of other properties in North Street. Members of the committee will be aware that a revised plan has been circulated as a late item as further amendments have been made, and the window and doors are now proposed to be timber painted in an off-white colour. This change in material accords with recommendations made by our Conservation Officer and addresses the reason the less than substantial degree of harm for the character of the surrounding Struts Park Conservation Area was identified as resulting from the scheme. This is therefore a positive amendment that has been made, and we welcome the change, as timber-painted windows and doors are considered to better reflect the historic character of the building's surroundings. You will note that the application has generated a total of 16 objections, including objections from Councillor Swan, Councillor Repton and Councillor Martin, and the issues raised in objection are summarised in section 4 of your report. In respect of the objections raised and concerns expressed with regards to increased traffic, congestion and parking, Highways colleagues conclude that this car-free development would not result in an unacceptable impact on highway safety. The site is within a sustainable location that has good access to public transport and includes for a suitable level of cycle parking provision. North Street is already subject to parking controls, and as the development is proposed as car-free, parking permits would not be available for future occupiers. A note to applicant is recommended as being included in the decision notice. To advise of this in accordance with the recommendations of our Highways colleagues. It would therefore be hard to sustain a refusal of planning permission on the grounds of the development being car-free. Given its sustainable location and given that it could not be argued that resulting impacts on the highway would be severe, the proposal is considered to be broadly compliant with policy CP23 and the MPPF. Your report advises that no harm to residential amenity is deemed to be arising, with no adverse impacts on flood risk. Heritage consultees have not raised objections to the demolition of the existing workshop, and conditions of planning permission are recommended to deliver some biodiversity benefit in the form of bat and bird boxes and a sustainable archaeological scheme of investigation. Comments provided by Housing Standards colleagues have been circulated as a late item, and while they confirm that a HMO licence will not be required, given that the property is proposed to be occupied by only 4 people, they have advised that the floor plans meet the room size standards in the City Council's space and amenity guidelines for houses in multiple occupation, and the layout is permissible. They have commented on the ground floor bathroom, and I can advise that the agent has confirmed that this will be addressed by the applicant. This will involve only minor internal alterations, and if members are minded to support the recommendation, a revised plan can be secured which addresses this prior to planning permission being issued. Weighed in the planning balance are the benefits of removing an existing building that is unattractive and fails to add to the character and quality of this part of the Struts Park Conservation Area. The development would repair the built form in this part of North Street, and the revised proposal offers a building that is considered to be of an acceptable standard of design. The development would increase the variety and amount of housing and offer a small contribution to the city's housing supply. We also have to be mindful of the activity, noise and parking requirements that could be associated with the existing use of this site. In this case, we are satisfied that the heritage tests in the MPPF are met by the revised proposal, and the benefits of it do outweigh any harm that is deemed to be arising. On this basis, a recommendation is made for planning permission to be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Sarah. We've got on the notes that Mr Imber's not available, is he? No. So we'll move to the committee. Any questions, please? Councillor Martin scrubbed their name off the list for speaking. Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, from reading the report and listening to the officer's explanation, its existing state is really, really very ugly on the street scene and not something that we'd want to see in a conservation area. So I think I would support this application. My thoughts are that it will improve the street scene for the residents. And obviously with it being a car-free, I don't know how that will be monitored, but okay, if that's going to be part of the scheme, then I think I would welcome this application because it will improve the street scene in North Street and obviously give housing to people who perhaps are inadequately housed at the present time.
Councillor Kerr.
I also feel that it is a tight site. I think they've done some interesting designs, and I gather there's been quite a lot of history of the application as well. I think the angle of the roof is interesting with its lopsided aspect. And I'm pleased that we're going to get a new plan about the layout of the ground floor, and I would welcome making sure that we see that before we give approval, because I think that there are reasons for making those changes which the housing colleagues highlighted on that. I also welcome the change in the use of wood windows and appreciate that. The long rear roof has the potential, it's looking broadly south, and it has the potential for putting PVs on it. It's not facing the street, it is a conservation area. Would that be acceptable to have PVs on it to improve the sustainability of the building in policy terms? Because if so, I think this is the time when we could flag that up. You can now get PV tiles which are actually look very close to tiles. And there are examples, for example, the Grade 1 listed church at Melbourne has PVs on its south-facing transit, what do you call it, the south-facing long roof, although you can see that from a distance.
Sarah, I'm happy for that as well, sir.
Yeah, I think we could just add a note to applicant making a recommendation whether they want to consider them or not on the single-storey rear.
I was thinking of the upper floor because the ground floor has already got the window in it, and it was going to be overshadowed from other buildings, but the main roof at the top is south-facing at a reasonable angle.
We can add a note to applicant to see if I don't think it would be an issue on the rear roof slope. We'd obviously have to look at the design if it's something they wanted to do. But I think we can only put a note on to make a recommendation, not a requirement.
Thank you.
Lovely. Any more questions? Councillor Prosser, then Councillor Rawson.
Yeah, car-free, that's a new one on me. How are we saying that the council won't grant a permit for cars for that house? Is that how it's going to work? And do we do that anywhere else in the city? Is that we do? It's just me. Okay.
Where there's an existing permit scheme, it is exceedingly difficult to get a permit if it's a new dwelling because you're coming into a scheme that's already established. So I guess this one is buyer beware, hence the note to applicant on the planning decision. You're not going to get a permit for cars. If you've got a car, you really shouldn't be occupying this property. And that's the controlling mechanism and the applicant has said it's car free.
Yeah, but we are actually going to police that or not police that. Will it be on a database that it is car free?
Through you, Chair, it will police itself because you need a residence parking permit to park there. And applicants from this property will not be granted a parking permit. I think that's right, Chris? Yep, thank you.
Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Bolton's comments on this application. Was previously a workshop, so I think it's appropriate to bring it back to residential use, which is more in keeping with its surroundings. So I think the proposals will, as Councillor Bolton said, bring an improvement to the street scene. If anything, it is only a 4-bedroomed property, so I don't have any concerns about over-intensification or some of the other issues that we sometimes get with larger HMOs, houses in multiple occupation. And I think the parking issue has been covered, so I'm quite happy from a parking point of view as well, Chair.
Great, thank you. I'd like to move to the vote. Councillor Bolton, shall we move to the vote, everybody? All those in favour of the application?
7 in favour,
7
Chair.
in favour, yep. Any against? And 1 abstention. Thank you. Thanks, sir. Move on to item 8.2, 67 Church Lane. Rory.
Thank you, Chair. 2 housekeeping items. 5 additional objections have been received since the publication of the committee report. These focus on noise and disturbance, parking and highways issues, and the commercialisation of the area. A supporting statement from the applicant has also been received, which highlights the family-run nature of the business, the precedents set by 2 local pubs, the Abbey and the Paper Mill, and the potential for the premises to implement comparable uses via permitted development rights, which would not be subject to planning controls on opening hours. The implications of the suggested temporary permission for the viability of the business are also raised, and it's requested by the applicant that this aspect is considered particularly carefully by the committee. Turning to the main report, the application relates to 67 Church Lane, a commercial corner plot on the north side of the street that has been in use as a framing shop for many years. The site is surrounded by residential plots and is within the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site buffer zone opposite the World Heritage Site itself, Darley Abbey Conservation Area and a Grade 2 star listed terrace. Permission was granted last November for changes to the building and a change of use of the site from a framery to a cafe, deli and bar, with conditions attached restricting, among other things, opening hours. The approved opening hours are specified by condition 4 of the previous decision notice as follows. No customers shall remain on the premises outside the hours of 7 AM to 8 PM Monday to Saturday, and on Sundays 8 AM to 6 PM. Permission is sought to vary that condition with the effect of varying the opening hours. In response to comments received during the application process, the proposed hours have been revised to 9 AM to 10:20 PM Monday to Saturday and 10 AM to 9:20 PM on Sundays. 2 supporting comments have been received and 39 comments in objection, including 1 each from Councillors Martin and Swan. These are summarised in your report and centre on the potential for noise and disturbance, odour, privacy issues, parking and highways issues, and harm to the character of the area and heritage assets. No objection is raised by the Highway Authority or the Council's Environmental Health Team. Conditions are recommended on building fabric measures to minimise sound transmission and promote privacy. The principle of the use of the building as a cafe, deli and bar has been established by the previous permission on the site and constitutes a reasonable fallback position. It is also true that a cafe or other use in Class E could occupy the site with no planning control on opening hours. The amenity impacts of the later opening hours would likely relate to noise and activity from customers within the building and arriving and departing, vehicle movements associated with the business from customers and deliveries, an increase in street parking around the site, noise and smells from the kitchen, and a potential increase of people on the street and around the building in general. Given the proximity of neighbouring dwellings, any increase in activity is likely to have significant impacts. The acceptability or otherwise of the proposal is likely to be dependent on management decisions made by the business and possibly the licensing system outside the control of the planning system. To control aspects of the proposal that have the potential to create harm, in particular mitigation measures to the building to minimise noise transfer, the extraction system and odour control. Conditions on these topics are recommended. The effect of increased activity on the street scene, the setting of the surrounding heritage assets and the privacy of neighbouring residential plots is material, but is considered acceptable given the spatial limitations of the site and the absence of physical changes to the building proposed in this application. Overall, it's considered that the change in opening hours would have implications for residential amenity, especially for residents immediately surrounding the site. Whether the threshold of unacceptable harm would be reached is unclear, and there are a broad range of impacts that could be more or less harmful depending on how the business is managed. Given this potential variation in outcome and to allow for further assessment, a temporary permission of 12 months is recommended. Standard conditions are included as per the report, along with bespoke conditions relating to the suggested temporary permission, the extraction system, odour dispersal, signage illumination, sound minimisation measures, refuse storage, and the opening hours as proposed. The recommendation is to approve this application for a temporary period of 12 months, and you have 3 speakers. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rory. First, Ms Watson, you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jo Watson on behalf of the Darley Abbey Society. We didn't object to the original application because it broadly reflects the current shop's daytime hours and that of the nearby village store and respects the nighttime amenity of local residents. The Environment Team's response to the variation predicts a probable cause of noise nuisance, but strangely raises no formal objection on this ground. We consider this a weakened response that is both illogical and inadequate. Clearly, officers thought it reasonable and prudent to impose Condition 4 on the approval proposal, and no good reason has been given to move away from that sensible position. The reduction in the proposed nighttime opening hours to 10 p.m. would make no fundamental difference to the likely effects of a nighttime venue with regard to amenity. The proposed temporary 1-year condition merely clouds the principal issues and is unhelpful. It's highly unlikely the applicant could risk considerable capital investment converting the premises for late-night use without assurance that the business could run on a permanent basis. This condition is both unreasonable and unrealistic. Parking and sustainable travel. The proliferation of bars and hospitality venues in Darley Abbey already attracts more car-borne visitors than can be accommodated by the historic infrastructure. Another day and nighttime venue in the centre of the village will exacerbate this issue and increase nighttime activity. Residential Darley Abbey has a chronic lack of parking places for the number of cars visiting already. The pedestrian bridge has created a day and nighttime parking habit on Old Lane, where people park up and walk across to the various mill venues. Traffic jams on Alfreton Road and A61 also make Old Lane attractive for parking. The protected vista of the Mills World Heritage Site is via Old Lane. Sadly, this approach is now spoiled by vehicles crammed into gaps and onto pavements. Pedestrians, wheelchair and pram users struggle to negotiate the mess. We have no bus service, no safe bicycle parking shelters. There's nothing to encourage a modal shift away from cars. Climate implications had no planning response. Built in the 1930s as a village shop, with solid walls and an air-leaky structure, conversion into a nighttime venue requires deep retrofit to avoid unsustainable heating and energy losses, especially in winter. All developments require a carbon reduction energy statement according to the Council's Climate Action Change Plan. A fabric-first airtight retrofit strategy with heat recovery and cooling ventilation is a relevant recommendation in this instance. Not having to open windows in summer would also prevent noise leakage. Repurposing a hard-to-heat building requires planning guidance to ensure it has a sustainable future. Based on all of these comments, councillors should overturn the recommendation and refuse the application on amenity, parking and sustainability grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Watson. Mr Smith, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Hello, I'm a resident of Old Lane and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and other local residents in the vicinity of 67 Church Lane. We vehemently oppose the extension to the opening hours of the new cafe bar till 10:20, which we feel will be a detriment to local residents and their well-being. Our main objection is the inevitable noise that this will create in the evenings as visitors to the establishment come and go, as well as any noise created inside the property heard from the outside. And even with proposed soundproofing, we expect noise from open doors and windows during summer months. The problem would be exacerbated by a smoking area, inevitably at the front of the property. It would most definitely create noise and disturbance to local residents, as smokers gather outside, no doubt continuing to talk and drink. It also creates significant invasive smells by cigarette smoke wafting into nearby gardens, particularly again an issue in summer months. And there's also a serious concern about the noise and potential for rowdy behaviour of guests as they leave the establishment after an evening of socialising. Again, this would cause disturbance and distress to local residents. It's worth noting that the people inside the property and, of course, those smoking outside will have visual access into several properties, again, felt a complete invasion of privacy. Many of the households nearby are either elderly residents or families with young and school-aged children, the latter of which would need to go into sleep at the time when the cafe bar would be operating. This is a residential area, and the establishment is not in keeping with that. Many of the nearby residents have lived in the village for 30 plus years and are extremely disappointed that this potential change to opening hours is being considered. Any catering establishment will need to provide extra refuse and recycling bins to store and sort their commercial waste, and the only site that these can be placed feels on the front of the property, which again would be unsightly with potentially unpleasant aromas, litter, and most definitely again a noise concern, particularly emptying bottles into recycling bins potentially at night. As said, parking during the day on Old Lane is a well-known issue, but this issue would then continue into the evening. It's worth noting there's no parking for the property itself, and many local houses don't have drives or dedicated parking spaces, so if extended the opening hours, then these residents would potentially return home to find cars in their spaces outside their homes. Considering all these points together, the impact of noise, unpleasant aromas, car parking issues, smoking, all detrimental to the well-being of local residents, then as a community, we would ask the committee to refuse the extension of the opening hours.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Councillor Martin, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a step too far for this site, for local residents, and indeed Derby's nighttime economy. Many residents have welcomed the idea of a cafe in the village and have been thus far very open-minded about seeing how it develops. Now, however, we have a second application before the cafe bar has even opened, asking for extended hours. The extended hours will undoubtedly produce noise harm for residents living nearby. I mean, maybe a planner cannot say that before the fact of evidence, but councillors know that opening a bar on a residential street will cause noise harm, with customers leaving as late as 10:20 every night, bar Sunday, when it's 9:20 p.m. There are already noise complaints from residents living in the nearby Wearfield Avenue about noise from the licensed venues in the mills. If this application is granted, it will be the 7th venue with extended licensing hours in Darley Abbey. That is one step too far for a village like Darley Abbey. We should not be trying to create a destination village there. Many of the residents are families, as has been said, with young children, or they are elderly people. We have a designated destination area for a thriving nighttime economy already, and that is the city centre. It's only a short distance from Darley Abbey, and the city centre is where we all want to see more vibrancy and visits. As people living near to number 67 try to get their children to sleep, outside there will be more cars and taxis coming and going late into the evening, and people congregating outside to chat and smoke. Now, we all want people to enjoy themselves, but let's leave Darley Abbey as a village and stop this over-expansion of later night socialising in its very centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Rory, do you want to come back on any of those points before I go to the committee? And I've also noticed we've got the environmental guys. If you want to come in on any of those as well, feel free to do so. It's up to you, Carl. Yeah. Rory.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say that these are all relevant issues, and we think our position is that depending on how the business is managed, they may be acceptable, but we would need to see how it plays out, which is why we're recommending a temporary permission.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Councillor No.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question as it is a comment. Whilst understandable some of the objections to this, I just see that they play into the realm of possibilities which frankly falls outside the remit of this committee. And there has been a conditional or temporary approval for a 12-month period during which I am hoping that the colleagues in planning will be able to monitor how this is going. But again, I stress that possibilities fall outside the realm of our responsibilities, and I don't think we should set that precedent.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Kerr.
I find this very difficult because I'm not just looking at what is there at the moment, but at the long term, what is going to happen and what the potential is for that site in the future. The original application came in, and it's interesting that the application form for the approval that was given last year had a comment that there wasn't any waste needed to be dealt with, basically. So it's really good that there is a condition here to talk about waste. Now, that is an issue for me because we know at the moment we should be recycling as well as having black bin waste, and we should be dealing with food waste separately as well. So there are potentially a minimum of 3 strands of waste coming from that building as a cafe, which is a lot more than we've had as a framing store. And we can see from the framing store there is one commercial bin placed on the highway. I don't like the principle of bins sitting on the highway. It's probably been there for such a long time, there's not much we can do about it, but to have potentially 2 or 3 bins there, I don't think would be acceptable, and they would therefore have to clearly be on the frontage. And I'm pleased that that's being addressed in the proposals here. But the issue of noise is absolutely valid. I personally feel, evening noise is valid. I personally feel that a venue like this ought to be able to function successfully as a daytime cafe. I think there are enough people there who would welcome being able to have a lunchtime meal and an early evening meal and then to be going home. I may be wrong, and there may be some really good research done to say otherwise, but when you are competing with a good number of other venues in the area, to have something that's a bit different and not the same restaurant bar, to me makes sense. The other point, and I would also make, and it's on the other side of the coin. I think that it's useful to have small commercial sites within a residential area. People need to have shops. It is a service. You need to have a range of things so that you can have the facilities to support a community in that immediate locality. The fact that we have too many or a surplus or a sufficiency of bars and restaurants in the area doesn't mean that this would have to continue in that role forever. But if it isn't allowed, then there'll be an exploration as to what else that site might be used for. And demolition and some fairly dense housing could be the alternative. And I think that that also is something that we should be considering. I don't think we can do much about the sustainability of the building. I don't think that is something that we can, environmental sustainability, I don't think that is something that we can condition. But I don't think this is a simple decision. I hope that it can be shown to be viable as a daytime cafe, which is also more civilised for working hours as well.
You can, Paul.
I actually think Councillor Kerr's nailed it on the head. I'm going back to the first appeal decision, and I haven't made these up, I've not stored them up for this particular. The first appeal decision where the inspector said, effectively he said, what do the consultees say? What do the specialists say? And on that case, he said the consultees have generally accepted the noise and air quality, in that case, findings subject to the imposition of conditions, which leads me to say, sorry, Carl, what do our consultees say on this application and what are the noise impacts? Because I think it's all down to the noise evening disturbance. So what do our consultees advise? And members can take that on board or not. But we need to bear that in mind. If there's an appeal, the inspector's going to say, well, what did your consultees say? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. And I do notice that on page 24 and the top of page 25, there are the conditions that our chaps over there have set. And would you like to come in on that one, Carl? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Like you say, you've got the report in front of you with the recommended conditions. I guess a couple of things to say about this particular application. Obviously, we're governed by the National Planning Policy Framework, and the way that governs noise, nuisance and impacts on amenity is it refers to significant impacts, and in particular, whether significant impacts might remain following mitigation. And so what we've done with this particular application is recommended some mitigation in terms of reducing the potential harm that could be caused, whilst we accept that we're not going to be talking about a situation with zero noise from a development such as this. But we've requested improved insulation on the building. One of the big advantages here is that there isn't a sort of dedicated outdoor drinking area such as there would be for other sort of similar establishments and pubs. And that does make most of the noise quite manageable in many respects because we can insulate the building. We've requested for double doors, so that issue of the doors constantly opening and closing with customers and the noise being let out is largely mitigated because when one door's open, the other one's still closed. We've recommended screening around the smoking area, which we also presumed would be to the front of the building. That's both for visual amenity purposes, but obviously also helps protect in terms of noise. The applicants also accepted background music only. Now that's probably less of a planning matter, more of a licensing matter. And I'd note that this particular applicant hasn't put in a licence application yet. So it's probably worth highlighting that that is effectively another bite at the cherry with this particular premises, another opportunity to put in place management and mitigation to try and minimise noise. Going back to the National Planning Policy Framework, I suppose the other key factor here in determination is the fact that this already has planning permission for a cafe. And so it's really just the extension of hours is what we're looking at in terms of the impact. And that does lessen the impact in the perceived sort of planning policy context as compared to a completely new development requesting for a new sort of cafe bar. So they're the sort of matters that have been drawn to our mind as we've issued our comments for this application. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Carl. Councillor Rawson, then Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's worth noting that a licensing application hasn't been put in yet, so if it is purely the sale of non-alcoholic drinks, then that will potentially have a much less significant impact in terms of noise and the number of people that are potentially using the establishment. Personally, I agree with what Carl said. It's probably licensing committee where it's the more appropriate place to look at what mitigation and controls can be put in place to make sure that it's managed in a way that's sensitive to its location in the village and in a way that's going to allow it to function in harmony with the surrounding residential areas. So that would sort of take some of my concerns away, really, if knowing that if alcohol, if they do go for an alcohol licence, then licensing committee will look to put conditions on that, I'm sure. Can I just ask, in terms of how we sort of dovetail into the licensing committee, what are relevant factors for us to consider and what would potentially be relevant factors for licensing to take on board?
Do you want that one, Paul?
No. That's a really good question. I would say we're looking at land use. We're looking at the impacts of this proposal. It's land use. Is it appropriate for the opening hours of the premises, whether they sell alcohol or not, is not a planning matter. Is it appropriate in this location? Yes or no? And the licensing, I believe, would come in if they need a liquor license. Licensing would consider, is that appropriate to have those hours in this location, irrespective of what planning is granted, but mindful of what planning is granted? Because as you say, as Carl said, they could sell without a license non-alcoholic beverages. And if it's granted to the hours that they want now. However, a license could restrict, because they have particular concerns over the concerns that were raised by the objectors. And Mr. Teasdale, I believe you might want to come back.
I mean, there's a bit of a crossover in both. I mean, you can't actually avoid that. Although I think Carl probably put his finger on it quite succinctly when he sort of said that in terms of the licensing side of things, they've got greater control over the management of the premises. I mean, that's really, I mean, as Paul says, you're looking at from a planning perspective, you're looking at the land use, but amenity is a clear issue, and effectively the impact on amenity is the key issue in this, in terms of the extension. So there is definitely a crossover, but I think as you've said, Councillor, I think because they haven't actually submitted they haven't actually got an alcohol license, and it's obviously they are dealing with non-alcoholic beverages. I mean, the amenity issues are slightly different to what they would be under a licensing regime where the management of that would be crucial.
Councillor Bolton, do you still want to come in? Yep, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Rawson has covered some of my comments, because I was concerned, are we treading on the toes of the licensing committee? And clearly they haven't got a licence application yet. And having served on the licensing committee previously, they're not clearly the management of noise, etc., will be under their jurisdiction, not the planning committees. But I've read the report, and clearly I was pleased of the permission last November, because I think that in the heart of Darley Abbey, where I used to live, that utility there could be well served as a cafe and a deli, and I think that's a wonderful idea. But if you think of Darley Abbey, further down you used to have the Abbey pub, next to that you had the Legion, which is only just down the road from there. The other eateries and alcoholic establishments are over the river in the mill complex. They're not actually in the heart of the village like this property we're talking about this evening. So I do know a little bit about the logistics of the area. My concern was, I think, more pertinent to the licensing committee, which has been mentioned already. Because Darley Abbey in itself, wherever you put an establishment, there will be clear repercussions because of the proximity of the houses in a village situation. I think on the whole, I would go along with the recommendation for the temporary period of 12 months and see how things develop. But of course, that's pending, if at all they will go, for the alcohol licence. And that obviously isn't before us, or will be before us as a planning committee. As I said in my opening remarks, that's for another committee. But I think in balance, I'd go along with the temporary recommendation that's before us, and clearly the committee can review the matter in 12 months.
Can I just, thank you, Sarah, for that. Can I just ask, I don't know whether I'm asking you, Paul, or Stephen, or Rory, the temporary 12 months, is that from opening or when they get planning permission, if granted tonight?
Chair, through you, it depends on the wording of the condition. It could be from the date of the decision. We know they're not open yet.
Yeah.
We could, with agreement with the applicant, get them to tell us when they open, and then your permission, then your 12 months starts, which would give them a better bite of the cherry so we understand exactly. Yes.
I'd be mindful of adding that condition in, that from if we do decide that we go with this, that it's the 12 months from opening date. So we've got a 12-month period to look at the situation, rather than let them do the building works for 9 months and open up for 3 months, and you don't get Yep. Is that okay? Any more questions on this one, or shall we go to the vote? Move to the vote. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. All those in favour with the conditions that we've put in for tonight, please.
8 in favour, Chair.
4. Any against? None against, 1 abstention. Thank you. So application is carried with the conditions that we've put in tonight. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for the speakers. Thank you for turning up, and thank you for the people in the gallery as well. Thank you very much. Go to item 8.3, 87 Morley Road in Oakwood now. Sarah H, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to 87 Morley Road in Oakwood, or West Chaddeston. It's a full application for redevelopment of a residential property to erect 4 detached dwellings, each with 5 bedrooms. The site sits within a residential area comprised of detached and semi-detached houses and bungalows. It's in a corner plot at the junction with Brookfield Avenue, opposite Leesbrook School entrance. The houses are of a contemporary design, using brick and render, timber cladding and seam metal mansard roof lines, as you can see on your screen. Each plot would have off-street parking spaces, private rear garden with level access. Solar panels, air source heat pumps and electric charging points would also be installed for each plot. Each plot would have a driveway, parking and tree planting within the curtilage. The plot fronts Morley Road, would retain some of the existing trees on the site, which are covered by a tree preservation order. There are 3 street trees, lime trees on Brookfield Avenue, which also front the site and would also be retained. The design and layout of the development was amended during the life of the application, hence the fact that it's been in since 2021, when a new architect was engaged and submitted a revised scheme in March 2023. This was in response to officers' concerns to the originally submitted proposals relating to the design and layout, the impact on trees, and the proposed access arrangements. Third-party objections were received to the initial proposals and have also been submitted to this proposal, with concerns relating to the number of dwellings, highway impacts, loss of trees, and the impacts on residential amenity. The current dwelling house sits within a large corner plot, and there is considered to be scope to comfortably form 4 houses within the site, with private gardens, off-street parking for each plot, as you can see on the screen. Residential amenities of both the adjacent houses on Brookfield Avenue to the north and on Morley Road to the east would not, in our opinion, be significantly harmed by this layout, and a high-quality living environment would be provided for the future occupants. Proposed housing is considered to be of a good quality design and form, which would provide distinctiveness and sit well within the varied street scene in this part of Chaddeston. The scheme allows for the retention of some of the trees at the front of the site onto fronting Morley Road, which includes TPOs and street trees. The Council's tree officer is in agreement with the proposed level of tree removal and retention, subject to tree protection plan and arboricultural method statements. And the landscaping scheme is also recommended, all to be agreed by condition. The Highways Officer has no objections to the revised scheme in terms of access parking provision, subject to the recommended conditions. Land drainage colleagues have no objections to the proposals, subject to a SUDS drainage scheme being secured by condition. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust responded to the Protected Species Survey, which was submitted, and have noted that a bat roost in the building has been identified. So in this case, a Natural England licence would be required to be secured before any commencement of works took place on the site. This is covered by a recommended condition, along with details of external lighting, which may impact on nocturnal wildlife. The agent has incorporated bat bricks into each of the dwellings into the side elevation in response to the Wildlife Trust's comments. Overall, there are substantial benefits to the proposed development through delivery of new high-quality housing in a sustainable location within the Chaddeston area. Given the city is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, proposed delivery of 3 additional houses therefore carries significant weight in the tilted balance, having regard for the impacts on residential amenity, trees, the highway network and protected species. We feel the proposal meets the overall intentions of the local plan policies and overarching guidance in the MPPF, and we recommend it for approval subject to the recommended conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Sarah. Committee. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I think this is a most suitable site to put more domestic properties. My first reaction, having leafleted along there numerous times in my present role, and my past role, the street trees, because Brookfield Avenue is a lovely, lovely street, and those trees there on the frontage, so I was pleased to hear that the officer said they are being retained. My concern was the access, and I read from the report that there's going to be vehicular access off Brookfield Avenue, and then also one off Morley Road. Now, there is a bend on Morley Road there, and visibility is not that good, but clearly if the highways officer is happy for one access onto Morley Road to be developed, then clearly I'll go along with that. But I know it is the visibility as you come out of Brookfield to the left is not good, and particularly at school times. It is renowned around there to be, as are most of our schools in any case, but it is chock-a-block. But the site is a really, really big site for one dwelling, and I think it would be far more beneficial to have the 4, because as you can see from the site plan, it is huge, it is underutilised, and clearly, as we've said before, we do need more housing in the city, so I would be supportive of this application.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. I'll just add, in my present role, or my past role when it was Chaddesden, and now it is now Oakwood, I've delivered along there a lot of times, and I love doing that route because the trees and everything are fantastic. That was one of my objections when it was in Chaddesden, when it was originally came through to committee a few years ago, and also the access. I agree totally with you. We both know Chaddesden at the back of Rams now, to be quite honest. That was one of my concerns when this came through again. But it looks like every box has been ticked on the transport and the traffic side, which I'm glad to see. And the trees, whereas I think there's a couple coming down, Sarah, is that right? But I think the majority are staying as they are.
There is, yes. If you look at the site plan, on the frontage from fronting Morley Road. There are 3 of the TPO trees are being removed, but the tree officer has acknowledged that 3 of them are in poor condition, and they're retaining other trees as well within the site.
Anybody else? Councillor Nawaz? No. It's the next one down, yeah. It's the next one down, yeah. You should know Chellasdon better than us, Councillor Nawaz. So. Councillor Kerr, thank you.
I agree with some of the objectors' comments that these do look very different properties, but I think we're allowed to change our styles of housing. We don't have to be building things, you know, if we never change, we'd still be building houses that looks as if they're built in the 1800s out of Derbyshire stone, wouldn't we? But we're allowed to move on. And I particularly welcome the PVs that have been put on the top of these buildings, which we can see on the view, not this view because it's got the windows on the sides. And I just wondered, if we think that there is a very high standard of environmental design for these, whether we could put in a note to the architect as to whether there would be an opportunity for them to hold a sort of open day for people to be able to go and look before they become, before they're sold. Just let's use good design as a way of promotion in Derby, if we can.
Yes, Martin.
Could I just ask about the trees? And we sort of touched on it that there's some of them have got tree preservation orders. Is that right? Do we know exactly how many will be protected as part of the development, and how many potentially will be lost? And if those that are lost can be replaced either on the site or somewhere else nearby?
Sarah, you comment?
Yeah, there are 5 trees which are covered by the TPO, and they're all towards the front of the site facing Morley Road. So 2 of them would be retained, and 3 of them are coming out because they are in a poor condition. And they say the tree officer has confirmed that, but he does welcome the replacement tree planting which has been incorporated in the site, and there are a couple of other trees which are protected which are also being retained within the site.
Any further questions? Move to the vote. All those in favour of the application?
Unanimous,
Carried
Chair.
unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, as well. We'll now move to 8.4, 31 Mount Carmel Street. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a change of use from a 6-bedroomed, 6-occupant house in multiple occupation to a 7-bedroomed, 8-occupant house in multiple occupation. So the focus, therefore, is on the impacts arising from 2 extra people in the building. Now, can I pause there and take you to 7.3 of the report, so I'm not misleading you. At 7.3 on page 58, where it's the paragraph that starts, overall it is considered the proposed intensification of residential use would not have any overriding adverse impacts. It goes on to talk about it is considered that 1 additional person would not have any overriding additional impact on neighbours' amenities. Can I change that to 2? Because it's clearly from the description, it does say 2, it's 2 additional people, but the thrust of that paragraph would still apply. It is the, as I've said before, the harm. Where is the harm from the additional, in this case, 2 people living in that semi-detached property? In your report, you'll note at 5.2, our HMO colleagues have assessed the proposal. They have no objections for this house in multiple occupation. They do note for me helpfully that it will require a HIMO licence from them, so our licensing regime will kick in. And you will note that there are no highway objections to the proposal. And on page 59, 7.5, the conclusion, the proposed residential use would increase the variety and amount of housing delivery, hence the proposal is considered to be acceptable in principle. And the proposal meets all the council's housing standards. I know we've had issues and discussions about room sizes in the past, and we've had pieces of string around this chamber. The room sizes remain satisfactory, and there's a satisfactory quality of living environment will be provided. I did a bit of research because, as you know, some of you may know, I've been doing the Housing Multiple Occupation Article 4 study, and James helpfully has put up on the plan. In this street, there are 3 other houses in multiple occupation. In this street are 41 properties. That's a total of 4 HIMOs, which is only 9%. Those are the ones we know about. Those are the licensed ones.
3 or 4 official HIMOs.
Chair, through you, Chair. Those are the ones, those are the records I've got, those are the ones we know about. At Cabinet, for those of you who are watching who were there, I did go a bit further and say that we would be looking at policies to control these types of applications. Bearing in mind this is for 2 extra people, not a new one. Those policies could be 3 or more next to each other. This doesn't do that. Can we go back to the... I mentioned a sandwiching policy. It's easy to call that. Now, if you look at there's the 2 dots south of this, either side of a house, there's a sandwiching policy there because those 2 are either side of an existing house. One of those would fail if we had that policy in place. And no more than 20% in a 100-metre radius. We haven't got that. So this one would probably be granted planning permission for a HIMO in any case, even if the Article 4 was in. And I cannot find the harm for 2 extra people at this property. It meets the space standards. What they've done is actually converted the ground floor studio, which is a large, it's 18 square metres, into dual occupancy. And upstairs, there's currently a bedroom, which is, it's currently a study. And they want to put a bed in there to get an extra person in, with its ensuite, etc. And we find it's going to be very difficult to resist this proposal. You've got, as you can see on the slide, Studio 1 at the front, Studio 2 at the rear, that's the one that would have 2 people in, Studio 3 above, and Studio 4 and 5 on the first floor, all single occupancy, and bedroom 7 in the loft space as the extra bedroom, so you get extra person in bedroom 7 and 1 in Studio 2. Chair, I've got no reasons to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from anybody? Councillor Holmes, Councillor Kerr, Councillor Arnoa.
Just got in there. Just a quick question to the officers, really. It mentions in the objection bullet points that the changes or the increase in use has already been sort of been carried out. Is this not a retro? I mean, what's the validity of that? Is this a retrospective application, or
If I can help, Chair, this application on site at the moment is a 6-bed, 6-person HIMO, which is permitted. They've done the permitted development, permitted change, and what they show me is bedroom 7 is the study area, no bed in there, and I guess that's the only physical change, because downstairs, Studio 2 is laid out as a studio. It would have 1 person in at the moment, and this proposal seeks to put another person, add another person to that, so it's a dual person occupancy. So it's not retro, but yes, they have done the work because they've done the permitted development change.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I was just looking as well on the existing plans. Both of those two rooms have got bathrooms in already, so it is just putting a bed into the top floor flat and then top floor apartment, and then making the studio downstairs into a double bed. So yeah. Where did I get to? Councillor Kerr, that was it. Sorry.
Thank you. My take on this is that we already have an HMO, and it's been an HMO that we've had no say over as a planning committee. What we have in front of us is the opportunity to actually say what we think is good and is bad about this and potentially influence it. Though some of the objections talked about litter and waste and about travel, so I'd immediately say that if we can put in a condition or a recommendation that we want a waste management plan. Are the bins expected to be pulled to the street by the residents? Is somebody going to come and check that that's happening? Are they recycling correctly? Is there information in the general area as to how to recycle? Those sorts of questions. In terms of the cycle store, it's stuck there, a little room at the very back. If you look at the satellite view of this property at the moment, you would find it really difficult to get to that little shed at the back. I'm not quite sure what it is, and it might be from when the building work was being done. But it isn't terribly easy to get there. We want to make sure that it's going to be there for perpetuity, and that it is accessible, and that it is secure. And I think the current wording for that condition isn't strong enough, because I don't know if the doors and the angles to get into that building are actually going to make it possible to get a bicycle into that corner. So can we make sure that we're not approving that shed for cycle parking, but we're approving cycle parking that is accessible and convenient, and we need to check it. The other thing that strikes me is that for the people who are already in that building, and I guess they're there, they have lost part of their shared space, and to have shared space as that workroom, office room, for those who are working from home, it gave them an opportunity to be somewhere which was not the bedroom to be working from for their meetings, and we've lost that. And I don't think we can condition it, but there is a cellar. If that cellar is dry, it could be a space that could be replacing what has been lost for the improved quality of life for people in that building. And we could also put a landscaping condition on the outside space so that it actually could be used space in the summer, or even in the winter if you're feeling hardy. So there are a number of things there that I think we could do to improve the quality of this for people who are living there. Potential use of the cellar, if appropriate. Make sure that the cycle parking really works. Landscaping of the garden, so that is a valuable outdoor space, which we learned about in COVID. And finally, the advice on travel and waste management. Thank you, Chair. If others are happy to condition any or all of those, I'd be pleased.
Thanks, Lucy. Ndukwe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is more of a general comment, not just to this, but for other applications as well. Because there are times we see some applications here, we know the areas, we know what the areas look like, but what versus what's officially there in terms of number of HIMOs and all that, and also some of the issues that arise with a lot of these in our different communities. May I ask that we also look at the possibility of getting presentations from some of the neighborhood teams or the PCSOs with regards to just how residents or how some of these areas have been affected, because really there have been a lot of issues of just disturbances. But when you look at what we have officially and we see 3 or 4 HMOs, whereas the case might be 10 or more, then we do need to have other information with which we can make decisions. If not, we're not really kidding anyone or fooling anyone, and we do look like we're abetting some sort of gaming of the system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You can, Paul.
I'm with you. Yes. As part of the evidence gathering for the Article 4 direction, that is exactly what I did. Reached out to our community and neighbourhood teams, and when I found out I was presenting this, I've reached out to our community and neighbourhood team and say, look, can we consult you, because we're going to, on every HIMO that comes in as a planning application, because you need the full picture of the antisocial behaviour, the car parking problems, the litter. Rather than just relying on a bullet point list from neighbours, we need the complete picture, the evidence base. I suspect they will have it in ward area and won't be able to drill down to particular streets. But I've asked the question, and they'll know where their hot areas are, so that we can inform you as part of the planning process.
If I might, Chair?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Just to go back on that, I'll give an example. Yesterday, we had some deep cleaning activity on Peel Street in the ward, and because there were already some sort of restrictions on adjoining streets and all that, we then saw that residents of some of the streets parked their car on that street. So again, it goes back to some of these issues of restricted parking that we see. Yes, they look good on paper, but we do know that they spill into other streets. So we do need that local intelligence to be carried into our briefings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Prosser.
Yeah, just a quick one. I was quite interested with Lucy's comment about a reduction of amenity to the residents, which is quite an interesting way of looking at it, because the space in this one is quite limited for the residents, and that's not really desirable. The other point being, obviously, a lack of data is really hurting us here again, because 4 licensed HIMOs in that street, there could easily be 16 plus HIMOs in that street. We don't know. Or I don't know. I mean, I'm not that familiar with that street or the residents in that street. And I don't know how we solve that problem of the lack of information, because if there are 16 in that street, we might have a different opinion on this application. At the moment, obviously, we know of 4. It's not that helpful, but okay.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Knowles.
Yeah, I know the street very well. Parking is the biggest issue there. You can't move your car. Once you moved it, you can't park there. And I would like you to put a condition about the bins. If you go up and down that street, when we walk about, there's bins all over the place, especially where these flats are and HMOs are. We need to do something about the bins. If you can put a condition in or anything like that. And one of the things, I don't know, Paul probably can help us in this. Each time they're adding a flat, on. Originally there were 5, then 6, then there could be 7 or 8. Where do we stop?
I don't want to appear flippant. I guess they stop when they've used up the space in the property. Now, I take on board Councillor Kerr's comment about note to applicant, review the basement for a replacement study. What I don't want to do is alarm bells, and you can start putting a person downstairs as well. I think we're saying no, because if you look at it, they've got no daylight. It's a dark. Yeah. So you've got your light on, you tank the basement to make it suitable for storage or working space, but it's not it. So if they'd have had a grate there, the old coal grates with a light well in there, you could see them trying to squeeze another one. We're not there. I think where we stop with this one is he's got studio apartments, and he has conveniently taken his study that was upstairs and found he could meet the space standards and have it as a bedroom upstairs.
Thank you, Paul. Do you want to come and stay on that one?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Paul, actually. Obviously, I don't think you'd have a problem with putting a waste management condition on. And the cycle one, you can take on board Lucy's comments and amend that one.
Yeah.
There was only the landscaping point question. I wasn't sure whether you want to comment on that.
Sorry, Chair, through you, I think the landscaping and the applicant's review of the basement should be as note to applicants, because this is already there. I need to relate it back to the extra 2 people and be reasonable about the condition. But if you're a responsible landlord, you'd be doing the landscaping anyway. You'd be making it look nice. You'd have a waste management plan and recycling plan in place for people to take the bins in and out, wouldn't you? Yeah. So I can do those 2 as landscaping and review of the basement as a note to applicant. But waste management plan, I think, yes. Recommendation as an extra condition.
That's great. Thank you, Paul.
I think if you think, Chair, what we did at Linton Street, and we had the waste management plan there, and there were several conditions, because that was, when we had the site visit, that's when you really see what the situation is. So I think we can learn from that. But I think a waste management plan should be standard.
Thank you very much. Would anybody like to move to the vote? We'll move to the vote. So, all those in favour of the application? With the extras, yes, Lucy, yes.
7, Chair, in favour.
7 in favour. Any against? That's 1, and 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Sorry, me again. Going to item 9, potential future site visits. Sarah H. again, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We just have 4 potential site visits this evening. This first one is pretty familiar to all of us. It's St Mark Parks. It's just another reserve matters for manufacturing facility on a small part of the site. So. Next one, James. This one is a variation of approved plans. It's for the development of the Stevenson building, which has been extended. So again, it's improved. This one is more interesting. It's the former police station at Cotton Lane. It's a conversion of the police station and new build for 101 apartments, landscaping, quite a green scheme, car parking and cycle provision. So. And last but not least, another variation of condition for the St Benedict's School extension. So it's the landscaping and biodiversity, so it's nothing concrete. And that's it this evening.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, committee. Thank you, officers, for turning up. And thank you, Nigel, at the back. Say some good things. Thanks, everybody, and see you next month. Thank you, thank you, thank you.